Hi everyone, my name is Angela and it is time for my favorite video of every year to film, and that is my favorite books of 2025. Right now I have read, I think, 103 books and I don't think I'm going to finish any more, so these are my top 10% basically. We're gonna go in ascending order, so let's start with book number 10. Book number 10 is my favorite contemporary romance of the year. It is the only one that made the list, and that is Next to You by Hannah Bonham Young. In this story we have Lane, who is 27 and she's having a bit of an identity crisis. She doesn't really know where her life is going, and one day she gets this inspiration online to renovate a bus and kind of have a traveling tiny home, and she has no renovation experience. All she has is some money left over from this inheritance. And within her friend group, I think they live in Toronto, they are definitely in Canada, within her friend group she has this friend named Matt, who is our MMC, and he's a mechanic. Matt is such a sweet guy, but he's also a mechanic, and so he kind of has that best of both worlds thing where he's like manly and knows how to fix shit, but he's also very sweet and nerdy and kind. And so we really see their friendship grow in this book, which is really fun and a nice way to not necessarily have a slow burn romance, but to see them kind of go from like lukewarm friends to really great friends to lovers. So he is helping her to go get this bus, across the country, not across the whole country, but there's a bit of a road trip element. Then they come back home and they're renovating it together. And so there is a little bit of that road trip element, but not for the whole book, which I think is fun. There's some family stuff in here towards the end of the book that was so incredibly heartwarming and made me cry. I really loved this. I cried. I was kicking my feet. I was obsessed with these two characters. I think this cover does a really good job at depicting both of these characters and what they look like and what I was picturing. Lane is very, I think, realistic in that she doesn't completely have it together, but she's not like so chaotic and annoying that you're gonna dislike her as a character. And then, like I said, Matt is like a hot nerd, basically, kind of a mix between like buff and dad bod vibes. He's very teddy bear, golden retriever type of guy, but still hot. Very fun to watch these two fall in love, and yeah, this is my favorite contemporary romance of the year. Book number 9 is a fantasy romance, and that is Sword Hard by T. Kingfisher. This takes place in a vaguely medieval-like fantasy world, and we have our main character, Hala, who has recently inherited a lot of money from her uncle, but unfortunately she is living in this house with other family members who are very money hungry, and they have trapped her in her bedroom, and she is so desperate to get away from these people who are treating her horribly, who have all this power over her and won't let her escape with her money, which is rightfully hers. And she sees this sword on the wall and she's like, okay, I guess I'll just like die. And that sounds really dark, but I promise the book and the way that it handles things and the way that it comes about is very silly, and none of it is like particularly dark, but there is that in the book. And little does she know that inside of the sword is a man named Sarkis, and he is bound to whoever unsheathes the sword, and he is bound to protect them. And so he helps her escape from these terrible relatives, and so they are going on this journey to try to find help and answers, both about her inheritance and how to get that, and also like what the fuck is going on with him as he is trapped in this sword and has been for a really long time. And obviously they fall in love. I just love the way that T. Kingfisher does fantasy romance. I love the way that she constructs the world. It's enough world building to allow me as the reader to picture everything in really great detail, but there's also humor and wit and whimsy, and I really think that it's just such a good balance of whimsical, fantastical, and romantic. I love what she does. I think her writing style is wonderful. I had so much fun with this, but I was also completely invested in their romance. This is just exactly how I like my fantasy romance. So this was book number 9. Highly recommend if you are looking for a truly good fantasy romance book out there. Book number 8 is a classic that I have been meaning to read for a long time. I think the reason that I actually picked this up is because I did a TBR jar reading vlog and I drew the name of this book, so I kind of had to read it. I did enlist the help of the audiobook, so honestly, both of the classics on this list, I had help with the audiobook. So pro tip, if you're trying to get into classics, having both the physical and the audio is like an amazing way to do it. Anyway, the book is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I have seen a lot of readers, like people in their 20s, people who are not reading this for school, love this book, pick this book up just for no reason at all, even if they're not reading a lot of classics, and love this book. And so I should have expected to love this, but I actually didn't. I was really surprised by how much this got me. I typically don't fall in love with American classic literature, which is what this is. So this takes place in the farmlands of the Salinas Valley in California. I have no idea like where that is exactly, but that's kind of like a really important part of this book is the setting. And we are following these two families, the Hamiltons and the Trasks, more so one family than the other, but their destinies are kind of entwined. And this book is kind of just a retelling of the book of Genesis from the Bible, and very much just a character study. I mean, there is plot, but like it is just so much about these characters and big themes like, you know, good and evil and family rivalry and love and loss and wickedness, you know, things like that, but set in, oh god, whatever time period this was. I don't remember exactly what the time period is for this book, but just read it. It is not without fault. There are definitely some problematic elements in this book that you should, as a reader, be able to point to and say, you know, that's not great. But overall, I think this novel is fascinating and it has a lot to say. I think there's specifically this female character that John Steinbeck almost like didn't even know what he was really doing with this female character, and I would love to see a contemporary author, a female author, kind of reimagine this female character and kind of give her a different perspective, because you know how in like Greek myths there are some female characters or monsters who have been, you know, villainized, but then when you really listen to the story, they are the victim, or they, you know, had really good reasons for what they were doing. I feel like there's this evil woman character in here who's just so fascinating. I was just absolutely drawn in by her. I keep saying that I want to read like papers about this book, and I haven't gotten around to it yet, but I will, because I really want to see how academics and scholars interpret this one evil female character. So a really fascinating book. I was absolutely gripped while reading this. I didn't really want to put it down, which is not usually how I feel when reading a classic. I kind of have to push myself to pick it up, but there was just something about this that was so gripping. So, East of Eden. At number 7, we have another fantasy romance, proving that yes, I can love fantasy romance. I'm just very picky about them. My worst books of 2025 video will be coming out soon, and that will feature some fantasy romance that I really hated. But on this list, we're talking about winners. So I have The Second Death of Locke by V.L. Bovalino as my next favorite. This one also has a vaguely historical medieval fantasy vibe, and we have our main character Gray, and she is a magical well, which means that she has this deep well of raw power inside of her, but she can't use it herself. And then in this world, mages don't actually have the power within themselves. They need a well to draw from in order to do magic. So she is bound to this magician Kier, and they are like best friends, childhood friends, partners on the battlefield, like just a bond closer than anything you can think of, because they have each other's lives in their hands and they are truly obsessed with each other, but it is not explicitly romantic at the beginning of this book. So there's a lot of angst and yearning because it is very complicated for people in this scenario to fall in love. I don't know that it's explicitly forbidden, but it's just not really something that is often done. And Gray and Kier's kingdom is actually at war with the other kingdoms in this world, and they are assigned to this quite dangerous mission, and so we are kind of on a quest journey story throughout most of this book, and we are following them try to protect this child from an enemy kingdom and complete their mission and maybe fall in love. Who knows? I mean, it's fantasy romance, so what do we think? And then Gray herself also has a really big secret that she is keeping from Kier, which is hard for her because, again, these two are bonded so closely. I would highly encourage you to not read the back of the book. I think the back of the book gives away too much. In the vlog that I read this in, I made the mistake of reading the back of the book before I started, and I did kind of spoil myself for something that I might not have picked up on in the book, but it's not a huge deal if you do know the full synopsis. It's just a little bit better to go in without that knowledge. I loved this book because it was so atmospheric. I felt like the tone and the atmosphere and the writing just allowed me as the reader to just dive into this world and feel completely immersed in it. I knew exactly what she was putting down, and I loved what she was putting down. I think it was a bit darker than some of the fantasy romances that I tend to love, but like not super dark. This had high stakes and plot, but also had a really, really compelling romance in it, which is just the best of both worlds and what I always hope for from fantasy romance. I loved the character work, I loved the writing style, I loved the setting. Just, I mean, what is there not to love? So I kind of think of this as a little bit of like a darker gothic medieval fantasy romance with a lot of emphasis on battle and war, but also magic and a bit of found family. So highly recommend this one. Had a wonderful time with it. Coming in at number 6, we have a high fantasy book by one of my favorite authors, and that is Mad Ship by Robin Hobb. This is book 2 in the Live Ship Traders trilogy, and my favorite of the 3. It's the only one that I gave 5 stars. In this series, we are following the old trader families of Bingtown, which is this merchant trading town, and they have a long tradition of these families who kind of established the economy of this town. They hold all the power and the money. The real power comes in the form of these live ships, which are these sentient ships which allow them to trade up the Rain Wilds, which is this really magical place where they get these goods that are worth a lot of money. Anyway, Althea, our main character, one of our main characters, is the daughter of the patriarch of one of these families, and he passes away. She fully expects to inherit his live ship, but she doesn't. And so that kind of kicks off a series of events where she's trying to get her ship back. We're also following a pirate named Kenneth, who is determined to become like a pirate king and leave his legacy on the world and just dominate everyone and have all the riches and power that he could ever want. We do follow a variety of perspectives in this series, which is very different from Robin Hobb's first trilogy, in which we are only reading from one character's perspective. I loved book 2 because we picked up so many plot threads from book 1 and they went so many interesting places. I was just completely absorbed into this book. I was having a great time reading it. I loved the ending, especially the ending was really explosive and fascinating and, you know, game-changing in terms of the plot of this book, and I was just live, laugh, laughing. Unfortunately, book 3 in the series kind of disappointed me, but this book I just had a wonderful time with. I loved where the plot went, and yeah, I just had an excellent time with this. Robin Hobb is a top tier fantasy writer. If you love epic fantasy, high fantasy, and you read Robin Hobb, you're probably gonna see how talented she is and how intricately she plots things and how much heart goes into these characters. All of the seafaring, you know, being on pirate ships and merchant ships and trading ports was so fun in this series, and unlike a lot of fantasy books I read, so it was really refreshing. And yeah, just some truly intricate plotting and character work in this series, and this was my favorite of the 3 for sure. Coming in at number 5, we have European Travel for the Monstrous Gentleman by Theodora Goss. This is book 2 in this series. The first book is called The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, and that was on my best list last year. I think the best way to describe this series is a found family of monstrous girls that are related to famous figures in Victorian literature like Rappaccini and Dr. Moreau, Mr. Jekyll, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And they are solving mysteries in Victorian London, and they are also finding community with each other, finding family together, because they are all kind of, they have all been experimented on by these terrible men who, you know, took the science and the alchemy and the magic too far. So they are surviving together and also solving mysteries, and in this book, We are on a European romp through various countries. We have so many figures from Victorian literature that make appearances in here. So a lot of this is really like a playful retelling, but it's not a retelling of like one specific story. The author is just really playing with all of these different characters and making them her own. There is a really great plot in this book and in this series, but also the characters are so strong. There is just so much fun and heart and wit to these characters and to this book. So I just had an incredible amount of fun with this book. I was having the time of my life. I listened to a lot of this on audio, and the audiobooks are absolutely fantastic. I can't tell you much about the plot of this book because obviously it's a spoiler, but if you like books set in historical time periods like the Victorian period, if you like books with humor, if you like found family and witty Victorian girls, if you like books like A Curious Beginning and the Veronica Speedwell series, I think you would really like this. It truly is just such a fun historical fantasy time. There's really nothing like it out there, and I love this series so much. Coming in at number 4, we have Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher. As you can see, T. Kingfisher just does fantasy romance the way I like it, and I love that I discovered that this year. These books actually take place in the same fantasy world, I believe, so I feel like this cover does a really good job at giving you a hint as to what the setting looks like, and you know, we do have this like medieval city setting, we have castles. So in this book we have our main character Grace, who is a perfumer, and then our male main character Stephen, who is a broken paladin, which means that the god that he serves has died. And these two have a very fun and humorous meet cute, which I will not spoil, and I encourage you to not read the back of the book. And so they meet and they kind of become friends and they kind of have crushes on each other, but there is also this plot of a killer roaming the city. So it's a very interesting mix of like darkly whimsical fantasy with like coziness and fun. Like, although we have a sinister serial killer who is decapitating people, we also have this hot paladin who knits socks and is afraid that he will kind of lose his mind and go on a killing spree himself because he is broken and his god has died, and sometimes that happens and these broken paladins go berserk. I just had the time of my life reading this. I was having fun every single second. I was loving the characters, loving the plot, loving the setting and the world. Luckily, this is a series. I have all the other books, so there are 3 more books in this series, each featuring a different couple. So there are side characters in this book who are going to get their own love stories and be at the forefront of the plot, which I'm so excited for. There's also a very cute animal companion, if I haven't mentioned that. So yeah, definitely deserves to be number 4 on my list. I loved this so much. Coming in at number 3, we have These Infinite Threads by Tahera Mafi. I was not expecting a YA fantasy romance series to be at the top of my list for 2025, but it sure as hell is. So this is book 2 in this series. The first book is This Woven Kingdom. And in our first book, we have our main character, Alize, who is the long-lost heir to this ancient Jinn kingdom. And in this fantasy world at this time, the Jinn are very oppressed and have really no power. And if her existence were to become public knowledge, she would be in great danger. So she's hiding as a servant, but she also doesn't actually have any resources, any money, any family. Her family was unfortunately killed. And so she actually gets involved through a series of fateful coincidences. She gets involved with the crown prince of this kingdom, which is a very dangerous and forbidden scenario because this man's family would definitely want to kill her and eliminate her so that she doesn't, you know, take over this kingdom. And so in book 2, the way that this world opens up and completely changes a lot of things and gives you so much more. You know, we have dragons and magic and yearning and pining. We have found family. We go to a new like part of this world in book 2, and I was just having the time of my life with this book. The way that Tahera Mafi sets up this romance with the, again, yearning and pining. Those are really the two like key words. The way that she slowly reveals more details about this scenario that makes it so much more heart-wrenching and juicy and like, oh my god, like the plot is getting crazy, is so good. It's just pure entertainment. I was, more than any other book this year, this one had me truly entertained, completely sucked in throughout the duration of this book. I was just in it. It was like a complete movie in my head, which every book is a movie in my head, but this movie was so good. Coming in at number 2, we have another high fantasy book, another book that I originally read as a library book and loved so much that I had to get myself a copy, and that is The Raven Scholar, which is officially my favorite fantasy book of 2025. I got this beautiful edition used. This is an Illumicrate edition. I really love how this naked hardcover looks, and we also have art for our main character, Nima. So in this fantasy world, there is an empire, and every time an emperor steps down, there is a contest to find the next emperor. And in this world, we have these sacred animals, and they kind of represent religious orders. So you as a person, when you reach adulthood, will choose which sacred animal you want to follow, and they all kind of have different traits, kind of like in Divergent, where it's like, if you have these traits, you go into this group. If you have these traits, you go into this group. It's a little bit like that. I mean, this is a lot better than Divergent, but so a champion from each of these groups representing each of these sacred animals compete to become the next emperor. Unfortunately, this year, one of the champions is murdered before the trials begin, and our main character, Nima, who is an imperial scholar, is tasked with solving the murder of one of these champions, and she only has so many days to do it because once the trials are over, everyone will disperse, and she has to kind of get involved in these trials as well. All of this is taking place on this imperial island. I'll show you the map. So there's a little bit of an isolated setting because whoever committed the murder is ostensibly on this island at this time. I thought the writing and the plot and the atmosphere were all excellent. I was completely absorbed in this book. There's just so much to love about this book. You have this academia side to it. You also have these trials that involve strategy and fighting and cunning and wisdom. You have kind of the magic and the religion side to it. You have this budding romance between these two people who used to know each other and used to be best friends, and you have the dynamics between all of these contestants who are vying for the, not the throne, but for this, I guess the throne, to be the emperor of this empire. You also, of course, have the murder mystery. You have the setting of the imperial island and of the larger empire that really interestingly combines like Eastern and Western inspired fantasy stories. Like parts of this almost reminded me of like the Poppy War. So I guess like Asian inspired fantasy stories and like European inspired fantasy stories, it's kind of a blend. So above all, I just think that everything that Antonia Hodgson tried to do, she knocked out of the park. This book really accomplishes everything that the synopsis makes you hope is going to be good. You know what I mean? Sometimes you read a book with a really good synopsis and you're kind of like, okay, you didn't really deliver on what you promised, but this book really knocks it out of the park on every aspect and was so unique and immersive and unlike anything I've ever read. Truly, I just think the mix of influences and the plot and the characters and the world were unique and just excellent. I mean, I don't want to get people's hopes up like too much for this book because then you're going to be disappointed, but I really do think this is a special book, and I know that this is on a lot of people's best lists this year, so give this one a try. I truly think it is refreshing, but also delivers on everything that it promises in the synopsis. My number 1 book of the year is a book that was published in 1938. It is a book that apparently Taylor Swift loves, which makes total sense, and it is a book that I did not expect to love this much, but should have, because so many people love this book, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Our main character in this book is an unnamed young woman who meets this man, Max de Winter. They fall in love and he offers her his hand in marriage, and he whisks her off to his estate called Manderley, but he seems to be haunted by the memory of his dead wife, Rebecca. And it's not just him that can't seem to forget about Rebecca and let Rebecca go, but also just this house. This estate is run by his housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers, and she is constantly bringing up Rebecca and comparing our main character to Rebecca and telling her how Rebecca would do things. And so our main character decides that she needs to figure out what is going on so that she can finally have happiness and peace. You know, she comes from not a lot of money, and so this marriage and this, you know, new lot in life was supposed to give her everything that she's ever wanted, but this memory of Rebecca is just not allowing her to be happy, and she is determined to fix that. I don't really know how Daphne du Maurier managed to make this book so excellent, because I have read things inspired by this book. I have definitely read things that are similar and derivative, and still this book managed to surprise me and completely draw me in, and that is really impressive, because I would have thought that my experience has been tainted by all these other retellings and reimaginings that I've already read. But the exquisite writing style that Daphne du Maurier has and utilizes in this book is just incredible. The atmosphere that she creates, the details, the character work, the plot, the pacing, it's just a perfect book. And although I might speak about some of these fantasy books with more passion and I had more fun with some of them, I truly think that this is objectively the best book that I read this year, and I also really loved it from like a more emotional standpoint as well. This is definitely one that I want to reread someday. I used a combination of like physical reading and audio reading to read this book, and I also watched the Hitchcock adaptation of this soon after reading, and I think that that experience also really made this book stand out even more, just because I had more visuals. After watching the movie, you know, I could picture Manderley even better, because obviously there's a real house in the movie with a lot more details than my little brain could conjure. So if you do not really read a lot of classics, I think this is the #1 book that you should try to prioritize. I mean, I don't read a ton of classics, and I'm so glad that I was forced myself to finally pick this up. It might seem intimidating. You know, that's kind of the thing with classics, right? They're written in the past. The writing style is different. The way that people converse is different. It doesn't necessarily have all the modern conventions of fiction that you expect with a book that makes it easier to get through. But this one is so worth it, I promise. And I'm so happy that I finally read this book and can be a part of the hype for this book. It feels wrong to say hype, but yeah, just a perfect gothic mysterious tale. Those are all of my favorite books of 2025. Let me know what your favorite books were. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more bookish content from me, and I hope you have a wonderful week.